One farmer, he scatter seeded his crop, and that did not go so well. He had no germination whatsoever. And then you have some growers who get this great big crop stand that they almost didn't expect. It's pretty rewarding whenever they call up here excited to turn in their harvest request, just because they poured their whole hearts and souls into these projects, and to see it finally come into fruition, it's an exciting thing for them.
That's Caleb Allen. He's the hemp program manager for the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today we're headed out to Arkansas. We're going to hear about the program there and what it's like to grow hemp in the land of opportunity. But first, a few fluffy nuggets of hemp news. Okay, so today is Wednesday, October 21st, and here are a few hemp news nuggets that caught my eye. Here's one from AboveTheLaw.com. The headline is Hemp Industry Hits DEA with Another Lawsuit. This was written by Natalie Bougenaise, who you might remember from being on our show in the past. She says that given that a trial may not take place for a year, the injunctive relief would give the hemp industry the ability to continue its activities without running the risk of triggering DEA enforcement actions. She says that Hemp Industry Association and RE Botanicals opened a new front against the DEA in its interim final rule. The HIA and RE Botanicals allege that the DEA is attempting to regulate products derived from lawful hemp by misinterpreting the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, that's the Farm Bill, and by classifying intermediate hemp material and waste hemp material, two necessary and inevitable byproducts of hemp processing, as Schedule I controlled substances. The lawsuit addresses the complex dry weight basis concept and explains that given the wet nature of intermediate and waste hemp materials, the hemp materials cannot be measured, nor can they violate the dry weight basis threshold, and thus are excluded from the Controlled Substance Act. The lawsuit declares that the DEA lacks independent authority to regulate any aspect of hemp production, including that of intermediate and waste hemp materials. The explanatory language accompanying the text of the rule reveals that the DEA has an understanding of the definition of hemp that is contrary to the 2018 Farm Bill's plain language and Congress's intent, and effectively sweeps hemp into the DEA's purview. And we all know that that's ridiculous. I'll have a link to this story on the show page for this episode. All right, moving on. The National Hemp Association has recently created a Standing Committee for Social Equity. I'm going to read parts of their mission statement. The National Hemp Association Standing Committee for Social Equity is passionate about capturing the state of cultural diversity, social equity, and inclusion in our nation, and creating a conversation of social equity and justice through advocacy and educational programs. The members of this committee represent people of color of many ethnicities, immigrant backgrounds, and genders, and who bring vast experience in the hemp industry, business sector, and law industry. As diverse and bold as the hemp plant is, this committee will capture and embody the plant's symbolism and bring it to fruition. Their goal is to leverage the hemp industry to provide opportunity in everything from farming, handling, manufacturing, and in the emerging high-tech sector to heal the planet, create the future, and make sure no one is left behind. I hope to schedule an interview with some of the folks on this committee in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. Okay, and finally, here's something I received from a group called Green Takeover. They are a hemp-focused sustainability project and management consultancy. They just published a 26-page document called Hemp 101 for Construction. It's geared toward construction professionals who are new to hemp. It's not a technical guide, but an overview of a high-performance, versatile, and resilient natural material that's going to flood the market in the coming years. I'll have a link to this document on lancasterfarming.com. But this looks like a really great tool for those of us in the hemp space who want to reach out to people who aren't in the hemp space yet. So thank you to Green Takeover for sending this my way and for creating it in the first place. And remember, I'll have links to all of this stuff on lancasterfarming.com on the show page for this episode. Okay, let's get into our show today. So, as you know, I am curious about the hemp industry, not just here in Pennsylvania, but all over the country and all over the world. And so in order to learn as much as I can about hemp in faraway places, I call up people in faraway places and ask them about their hemp program. So I hope you enjoy today's visit to Arkansas. Caleb Allen from the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. Could you give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do?
Yes, sir. My name is Caleb Allen. I'm the Hemp Program Manager at the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. I've been in this position for almost 2 years now. I started as a chemist here at the Department of Agriculture, and now I am managing the brand new Hemp Research Licensing Program.
Well, that's awesome. Can you tell me about the Arkansas Hemp Program?
Yeah, sure. Here in Arkansas, we passed a law in 2018 to establish the Hemp Research Program, and then in early 2019, we finally started accepting applications for growing and processing, handling industrial hemp here in Arkansas. We are now here in 2020 in the second year of the program. Lots of lessons learned in 2019.
Yeah.
My growers took those lessons and applied them to 2020. And so it's still brand new to Arkansas, but we are tackling this industry head on.
So how many growers did you have that first year in 2019, and then has it grown in 2020?
So in 2019, we actually licensed 125 growers. And now in 2020, we're at 120 growers. So down 5 licenses. I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. Some of the pending federal regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Some growers in 2019 decided this is not for me. It's a lot of hard work. We're investing a lot of money, and we can't seem to make it work. But that being said, we still had some new growers come into the program this season. Not every grower planted in 2020, but a large majority of them did.
Okay. And is it majority CBD growers, or do you also have some fiber and grain folks out there?
Yeah, CBD floral hemp production is still the most popular type of hemp production in Arkansas. We're looking at right around 90% of our planted plots are for floral production, and then about 5% for grain seed and 5% for fiber production. Most of the time, the grower is mostly interested in floral production and will also look into grain seed as well.
Right. What's the processing capacity in Arkansas?
Yeah, so in 2019, we licensed 33 processor handlers, and in 2020, we're now at 35 processor handlers.
Okay. That
being said, just like the growing side of this industry is having some growing pains, so is the processing side. This is brand new to everyone, including on the processing side of things. Some processors got a license, and they're still trying to get their company up and moving. Mm-hmm. Some of these processors are self-processing the material they grow themselves. So we have a decent number of processors here in the state, but they're still experiencing growing pains, just like the growing side.
Right. What's the permitting process like for both growers and processors? Like fee structure or, requirements?
Yeah, so we still are a research program, so all of the licensees are conducting research of some type for the betterment of the industry here in Arkansas. We just recently got fees approved for the program for next year. On top of your normal application fee, licensing fee, growers will now have an applied acreage fee. And they will also pay an additional fee for any greenhouses on the property. They'll pay for lab samples come harvest time. And then on the processing side of things, same thing, application fee, licensing fee. And then depending on what you're processing for, there's an applied applied processor fee. Whether you're processing for flour, fiber, seed, or grain, or if you're just handling hemp material.
So it's interesting that you're still in the research phase. Can you talk about maybe some of the research projects that people are working on? Is there anything that sort of, jumps out at you as really interesting?
Yeah, we have such a wide variety of research projects in the program. Some of them are very general. Can we make this grow on our farm? Sometimes we'll get soil numbers of like where their pH is at in the soil, and how does that affect the THC content come harvest. We also work with the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. Mm-hmm. They are conducting some research on some different types of hemp varieties, trying to find hemp varieties that behave well in Arkansas, staying compliant with that THC number. And then, of course, you have other growers who partner with some outside researchers looking for the same thing, finding varieties or strains of hemp that behave well here in the state. And they could look at anything from UV intensity, just general growing conditions as far as like humidity and shade. And all these factors do play a heavy role come harvest time concerning that THC number. So it's really interesting to see what these growers come up with and how that affects their crop.
Now, with your background in chemistry, like what part of this whole hemp industry really fascinates you?
Yeah, I'm, of course, very numbers and laboratory minded. So I think it's really interesting to see, sometimes I'll go out in the field and conduct an inspection, and this plot will be in the shade, same variety of this plot that is in the direct sunlight, and how that could potentially affect the THC numbers. And it's also really nice to see all the hard work the growers put into these projects. And we hope to provide some information to help them succeed at this. So I'm very sampling and laboratory minded. It's interesting to see the differences in all the varieties and how it behaves in the THC testing.
Right.
Really looking for a variety that behaves well in Arkansas.
Okay. Speaking of like the testing, like what are the testing requirements for growers?
Yeah, so growers can work with a third-party private lab to monitor their THC levels up until harvest. We know it's a delicate dance. We recommend growers to do that weekly testing of THC levels once their plants start maturing, just because if you don't do that, you're somewhat gambling going into harvest. So in the Arkansas program, you have to request to harvest, and once we get that harvest request, it'll trigger a department inspector to come out and pull compliance samples. Okay. So we, as a department, we are the final compliance testing, which helps the grower determine whether this crop can go to market or if it needs to be disposed of as non-compliant cannabis material.
So do you do that testing in-house, or do you also use a third-party testing?
We do the testing in-house here at the department. We have an awesome plant industries chemistry lab, and they help do a lot of other regulatory testing programs here at the Department of Ag. Mm-hmm. And Hemp is just another program that they help run the regulatory tests for.
Okay. Have there been many hot crops, and have you had to destroy any crops?
Yeah, the good news is we saw a lot more hot plots in 2019 than what we're seeing in 2020, and I'm going to knock on wood, because in 2020 we've only disposed of 4 plots that were not compliant with THC results. Okay. Whereas in 2019, we were looking right around 50 different plots. So a lot more compliant acres in 2020 than what we saw in 2019. Mm-hmm. And I somewhat attribute that to having a year under our belt. The growers learned a lot in the first year, and they applied that knowledge in 2020, and they were able to get started a lot sooner in 2020 and harvest sooner and so on.
The crops that were destroyed for being hot, do you know how far above the 0.3 THC threshold they were?
Yeah, some of them, for the most part, I think just one of the plots was above 1%, right around 1.8, and that's a little high, and we implemented our program mandatory disposal. As long as you're complying with what the department is asking you to do, you can stay compliant in the program. But if you're growing in good faith and you got your hands on a bad genetic source or just had the wrong growing conditions on your farm, we're not going to penalize you for that. But we do want to make sure that we're kind of weeding out the bad varieties in Arkansas and leaning more toward the compliant varieties that are compliant with the federal and state laws.
Right. And I guess you're going to still be on the 2014 Farm Bill rules next year too, but I imagine your state is working on drafting a new program, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, we're in some internal talks about which direction we're going to go with the program. We have been working with USDA to get approved under the 2018 Farm Bill, but a lot of the issues we're seeing in Arkansas are the timing issues. So the 2018 Farm Bill was signed in December 2018, and then right at the beginning of 2019, we were licensing growers and processors for the research program.
Yeah.
So we didn't even have a full year of research under our belt, and then we were somewhat being forced to move under the 2018 Farm Bill program. So we're pleased with the extension of the research program, and we're going to most likely continue as a research program for another year to allow our state lawmakers to look at the Hemp Act, the State Hemp Act, and potentially amend it. And then once our state lawmakers look at that, the Department of Ag will follow suit for whatever they hand us.
Okay. So we know that growing hemp is challenging. Farmers have lots of challenges, but are there challenges that are specific to growing in Arkansas that you can talk about?
Yeah, of course, growing hemp anywhere in the U.S. is going to be challenging. I call this gardening and not farming just because it's very involved, it's very laborious and time-consuming. But that being said, here in Arkansas in 2020, we saw a few hurricanes come through the state, just hurricane weather. So it was very rainy. Some growers experienced a little bit of flooding on their lands. It was a very hot season, of course. And with that hurricane weather coming through the state, so did heavy winds, which knocked some crop stands down. Other than that, aside from the weather issues, it's just general industry issues, just with the newness of all of this. And so we still have a lot of growers sitting with hemp material in storage.
From last year? Yeah.
Yeah, from the crop they grew in 2019. And I tell them, that's not unique to Arkansas. That's somewhat of a nationwide issue. And I think it all just goes into the growing pains of the newness of this industry.
Sure.
Maybe after a few more years, we'll get some more infrastructure in place for that processing.
Okay. Well, what is the Arkansas Department of Agriculture doing to help build that infrastructure and sort of develop local supply chains in the state?
Yeah, I see our job here at the Department of Agriculture, Arkansas Department of Agriculture, our number one concern, of course, is to keep our growers compliant with state and federal laws and our program rules. There's a lot of rumors and a lot of speculation in this industry, and I see our job at number one is to keep the industry compliant, and the number two, kind of help educate growers on basically what rumors there are out there, kind of helping clarify those rumors and keep everyone compliant with the program.
Okay. You said that you considered like the CBD growing to be more gardening rather than farming. On the fiber and grain side, like that could potentially be, great big farming. You said there's about 5% of the growers in Arkansas are sort of in the fiber area. Are you doing anything to promote fiber or grain as like a rotational crop for some of your grain farmers, or sort of the bigger ag folks out there?
Yeah, I think some of what goes into whether a hemp grower wants to grow for floral or fiber or grain is they're always looking at the end game. Where can I sell this material once I grow it? And that's somewhat where we're leaning on the industry to develop this processing side for fiber and grain, because right now the big rat race is the extraction, floral, CBD type of production. I personally would want to see more fiber and grain production, but I think what goes into that is supply and demand. Who can we sell this material to once we grow it? And I think that's going to take a few more years here in Arkansas to really iron out.
Was there any pushback in the state about hemp because of the marijuana stigma?
I think with really any completely new agriculture industry, there's going to be some pushback. We haven't really received any direct negative pushback. It's mostly just been like a lack of education around this subject. So we do a lot of this is the difference between hemp and marijuana, and we want to move away from the stigma of marijuana with hemp as we establish this new agricultural commodity here in the state. Mm-hmm. It's mostly just a question of confusion, and to clarify that confusion for growers, for the general public here in Arkansas, and definitely for law enforcement. And we as a department, we're always more than happy to assist law enforcement any way we can, because this is brand new to them, just like it is to everyone else. Sure.
So you get out to farms fairly frequently? So you've met with a lot of growers?
I meet and speak with growers fairly often. I was hoping to get out in the field a little more this season. Last year, it being the first season, there was still a lot of work to do here at the department, and I was pretty busy day in, day out. But with this year, was hoping to get out more. Then, of course, the pandemic came, and that kind of put some damper in some plans.
Sure.
But I have gotten out a little bit more this season to see what my growers have been pouring their hearts and souls into. Yeah. And maybe next season I can get out a little bit more, but I mostly stay behind the computer helping manage the program day in and day out.
Okay. Can you talk about like what's the average Arkansas hemp farmer like? I mean, are these people that were in farming before, or are they completely new to farming, or is it sort of like a wide range?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, it's your Arkansas farmer who's been farming their entire lives, just whether they're interested in this topic or they want to see if this will work on their farm. And that's kind of the whole point of the research program, is you shouldn't really hang your hat on this quite yet. We're still trying to figure out if this is a viable option for Arkansas farms. And of course, I'm sure you and your listeners know farming hemp is much, much different than farming any other agricultural commodity. And so for the most part, it's your normal Arkansan farmer who's been farming his whole life. We do have a handful of new growers in the program, taking their first stab at farming, especially with the younger crowd. But for the most part, it's just your normal Arkansas farmer trying to see if this is a viable option for their farm.
Are there any like stories you can share, like success stories, maybe that farmers have relayed to you? Sort of give us maybe a glimpse of life on an Arkansas hemp farm?
Yeah, most growers will start small, just because I think in the first year a few farmers bit off a little more than they could chew. We're going to grow 5 acres, we're going to grow 20 acres, and they found out really quickly that they may not be able to grow that amount. So this year we're seeing a lot more smaller plots being grown, and I'm seeing a lot more successful germination than what we saw in 2019. Some growers could not even get a germ.
Wow.
One farmer, he scatter seeded his crop, and that did not go so well. He had no germination whatsoever. And then you have some growers who get this great big crop stand that they almost didn't expect, and it's pretty rewarding whenever they call up here excited to turn in their harvest request, just because they've poured their whole hearts and souls into these projects, and to see it finally come into fruition, it's an exciting thing for them.
Yeah. How far along in harvest are you in the state?
Yeah, so I ran the numbers last week, and we have just about 70% of our growers have harvested. And we came into a few more harvest requests this morning. So we're almost done with harvest here in Arkansas. We still have a handful of people we're waiting to hear back from. But our big harvest rush came toward the end of September, early August. And now I think we're kind of on that downward slope as everybody finishes up their harvest.
Did your Department of Agriculture make any comments either to the USDA or to the DEA concerning the hemp rules?
Yeah, so of course the first time around, we as a department, we did submit comments to the USDA interim final rule, mostly aligning with what NASDA has come out with, saying that DEA maybe shouldn't be involved with the disposal of non-compliant plants, leave that towards state law enforcement. We also commented on the 0.5% negligent threshold. We would like to see that raised to 1%, just because there's not a whole lot of wiggle room between 0.3 and 0.5.
Yeah.
And it's not really fair to see the grower growing in good faith, and then just for whatever reason, if they go hot, we would just like to see that negligent 0.5 value increase to 1%.
Okay.
And other than that, we would like to see some post-harvest sampling, resampling procedures, just because like a one-and-done type of scenario isn't very pro-farmer, especially when they're growing in good faith. We would like to see that type of potential remediation still in place for the growers.
So you wouldn't be advocating for raising the THC threshold to 1%, but you are sort of pushing for the negligence cap, like for that to be raised.
Yeah, for the whole, that would kind of require a federal law change. The way our program is written, whatever that federal law changes to, the program will align, of course. And of course, we don't really know where that 0.3 number came from.
Yeah, seems pretty arbitrary.
Yeah, and we, of course, feel the effects of that just like the growers do. So whatever lawmakers would like to put that number at would be awesome, but 0.3 is a little arbitrary. I personally would like to see a 1% raise just industry-wide. But again, that's going to have to come from our federal and state lawmakers before anything like that could occur.
Right. Is there anything else about the hemp program in Arkansas or hemp farmers in Arkansas that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, in Arkansas, we are very much an agriculture state. We want to see this program succeed. We want our growers to succeed. And we're here as a department to help out or assist any way we can, and we appreciate the hard work that goes into this industry, because we are here at the department, we are working equally as hard as our growers are.
Right. What are the other big crops grown in Arkansas? Forgive me for not knowing that.
Yeah, no worries. Our number one crop is rice. So we are the leading producer of rice here in the state. And then I believe, just off the top of my head, soybeans is right behind rice.
Okay. Well, Caleb, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for explaining the program to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Eric. And again, I'm a big fan of your show. I appreciate the information you give this industry, because it is greatly needed. There's a lot of education that needs to be put in place as far as hemp is concerned.
Yep, well, we're all in this together. So thank you to Caleb Allen and the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. And thank you all for listening to today's show. That does it for me. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online, lancasterfarming.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at LFPodcastHemp. And if you want to get in touch with me, just drop me a line. Send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. And all right, until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp, 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 industrial hemp.
Episode 105 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.
Industrial hemp.